Now, Des Cal is a fifth-generation butcher and a Cork City councillor. In 2014, his business ceased trading and Des entered the insolvency process, ending his family's almost 140-year involvement in the trade. This morning, Des joins us to share a story of life after debt, along with personal insolvency practitioner Alan McGee. Good morning to you both. And Des, thank you very much for talking about this coming clean. Just very quickly, how did you end up where you were?
I suppose the debt on the business was large, generated primarily because of a contract that went wrong a couple of years previous. And literally when the market crashed, 40% of our sales went. So it was the immediate crash. The market just dropped, our income dropped severely. We had an overhanging debt. And then we just, at the beginning of the end, started to unravel from there.
And like a lot of people who find themselves in that, you kept going and probably kept spending your own money trying to keep it going, hoping that it would all turn out for the better, or...
Yes. I think when you're self-employed, you're always optimistic. You're always hoping you'll turn the corner eventually. That's correct. We kept going as long as we could. For the last 3 years, we would have taken no salary at all out of it.
How many people did you have working for you?
At that stage when we closed, 4, and at its height, 14.
And of course, you felt responsible not just for your family, but them and their families as well.
Yes, and equally, I couldn't have continued for the last number of years without the unbelievable support from the 4 staff in particular.
OK, look, it's not an unusual tale. Sadly, there are an awful lot of people in the same boat as you. Right, when push comes to shove and you have to close the doors, what happens then? What's the process like? How did you find it? How did you feel when you were in it?
Well, I'd back up slightly, Mark, in one level, that it's the decision to actually go into the insolvency is the hard bit. And you really have to recognise that you are insolvent. And particularly when you're self-employed, and I think people are all self-employed because we all manage our own household income and so on. And the reality is that you don't talk to someone else. So by talking to a PIP and seeing it on paper and recognising that you are insolvent...
Should you have gone in much sooner?
Yes, I probably should have gone in a year and a half prior.
Would it have made much difference to you coming out the other end more quickly?
Well, other than the fact that how you physically feel and mentally feel throughout a period like that, you would have been out of that sooner. I mean, anyone in that position, I think, they look forward to 4 o'clock on Friday because you can't get a phone call from the banks anymore. And then by Sunday evening, you start to feel nauseous again, and you're facing a long week ahead. So, and many people are in that position now still.
How did you find you were treated when you were into the process?
Well, when I went into the process, I have to say I handed over to Alan, and it was just a complete weight taken off your shoulder, and Alan bore all the heavy lifting at that stage.
When you held off for a whole variety of reasons, I'm sure, pride, the fact that it's your business, the fact that you're trying to support people and all the rest of it. Did you also hold off because you had, heard media stories or read media stories about it was a one-sided process and that, yes, you were in dire straits, but that it was going to get even worse once you went into this, that you'd literally have no say and, the bank's financial institutions had a veto?
Well, yes, I suppose while you're struggling, you're always in somewhat, you think you're in control. And once you go into this process, you give up control to do that. And I didn't really understand the system. So the most important meeting for me was about 4 weeks prior to me deciding to go in. It was when I first met Alan. He came down to the house, went through everything and said, you do qualify for it. And it's important that you do qualify for it. And then I really had a decision to make whether or not I would take that leap of faith.
OK, well, this is where Alan comes in. Alan, without going into any personal detail about Des' situation, was his scenario untypical or typical?
No, a lot of people are in the same boat. It's a matter of having to realise it and to decide that you're going to go and seek the help. And once they do that and then talk to an insolvency practitioner, they'll see that there are options available to them. And what I always recommend to them then is to sit down with family and friends, people they trust, and discuss that before making a decision. And then they'll find that there is support out there. People will rally around and help them or give them a second opinion.
This is, on one level, it's business. And, you need to be very kind of cold and calculating where business is concerned. But in a lot of these cases, in fact, the majority as far as I can see, you're talking about SMEs, you're talking about self-employed people, you're talking about people who built businesses. So it's much more than just business. It's deeply personal for them.
Oh, yeah. And it's
So how do you manage that aspect of it? And are the people on the other side, i.e. the banks and the institutions, is there any degree of compassion or leeway where they're concerned? Do they take this, do they factor this into their thinking when they're dealing with people like this?
not particularly. Not particularly.
Because we've heard that they treat people like this quite brutally. That it's very cold-hearted and very hard-nosed.
Well, I don't think it's personal from their point of view. They're working from a remote place where they're looking at facts and figures on pages. I'm meeting with the people across the table. I see the effect it has on their family and on their lives. Our job is to try and negotiate a deal for them. And thankfully, there are more deals being negotiated. There's more people being returned to solvency. The ISI are doing a good job. They have a website out there, backontrack.ie, which gives people information. And I would urge people to have a look at that and see the different debt solutions that are available.
Now, you know as well as I do, the ISI got off to a very sticky start and there was a lot of bad press about it. Maybe unfairly, maybe they were judged before they even, were up and running properly. But things have changed slightly, and I don't know, are people aware of this, that there was a perception that that the process was very one-sided and that the bank held all the cards. Now, since the veto has been removed by legislation, are people now aware of that? Are they less wary of saying, OK, well, we can go and talk to the banks, or it might not be as tough as we feared?
Well, I would say that the ISI got a lot of unfair criticism at the start. But now, with the legislative changes that have come in, there is the appeal process, and anecdotal evidence is suggesting at the moment that the banks are responding to that and that there's more deals being done. Also, the legislative changes in respect of bankruptcy by reducing the term of bankruptcy has helped a lot in our ability to negotiate with the banks to get a deal. Because if the banks are not going to be reasonable, a person can go bankrupt and be out of bankruptcy in 12 months and the banks get nothing.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but have the banks copped themselves on?
They're learning.
That's a very diplomatic answer, but that's a sort of a qualified yes, is it? Des, having been through the process,
Sure.
and I'm sure it was heartbreaking because it wasn't just your business, it was a family tradition, 140 years of it, which I'm sure weighed quite heavily on you. And also the responsibility for your family and the families of the people who work for you and all the rest of it. What are your thoughts on it? And we'll leave the final word to you.
Well, I suppose when I was asked about the show, I thought about it for a while, and I think I had a massive fear when I was in business. What would I ever do not in business? Particularly when I was self-employed, because you don't really know how to do anything else. And now that I'm out of it, I'm not totally sure what I will do, but I'm not afraid of it. And because I suppose you do learn a lot through it. I would urge people that if they think they're insolvent, they probably are. And they should address it, because the sooner you address it, the sooner you can get on with the rest of your life.
Just very quickly, the other jurisdictions deal with this all the time. People go bust, they pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and go again, and are successful again. One of the things that we've done in this country is that we've either allowed or made people go bust, and we haven't just taken their business, we've also taken their dignity. Are we better at that now? Is that still happening, or do you feel, no, that's over? You can do it, and you can come out the other end with your head held high.
Well, I think you can come out with your head held high. I think we still have scars. Personally, I suppose from a family point of view, I'd be hesitant again to go back into it, because it wasn't just me, it was my wife and 2 kids involved as well. And I don't know, I can still remember the last 4 years before we finally had to close. I don't really want to put my family through that again, so it would be a collective decision if I go back in.
Well, listen, thank you very much for sharing that and for your honesty. It's a cautionary tale. Thank you as well.